What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you want to support me, you can always use the TCGPlayer link in the description down below, or just liking, commenting, subscribing, boosting that algorithm will always do the trick. Now, let's get into today's Deck Tech with Sauron. And honestly guys, I'm a fan. He's effectively a mana gorger Hydra in the command zone with that amass ability. And then he's got the ability to draw and discard a lot of cards. Now, we could take this the traditional Grixis Nekusar route, where we make our opponents take a lot of damage by drawing and discarding cards. But honestly, that's a little boring, overdone, and puts a huge target on your forehead. So we're going to take a different approach of maybe using a Timmy strategy where we buff our entire board state whenever we draw cards, using cards like Chasm Skulker. Then we will sacrifice our Mana Gorger Hydra army to go ahead and get a lot of value, such as, I don't know, maybe a Ghoulcaller Gisa, turning that, huge creature into a bunch of little creatures, giving us an instant board state. Now, we have a bunch of creatures that do that, and we have a lot of ways to sacrifice them for value. Additionally, then we're just going to bring them back from the graveyard. And like Sauron the Necromancer himself, we could end the game out with a huge Rise of the Dark Realms, since we will be wheeling and dealing our opponents straight to oblivion. So, if that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. Let's kick it off by talking about those drawing and discard synergies. We have Bone Miser and Waste Not. Now, these are kind of two sides of the same coin, right? One will benefit us when our opponents discard cards, and one will benefit us when we discard cards. Torog Dread Cantor, this guy can get massive very quickly, which is exactly what this deck wants to do. One wheel effect and you might be looking at a 21-21. Browlin is a bit slower because it only triggers when we discard cards, but we can discard our hand more often than our opponents, so that does work to our advantage, and he's just going to sprinkle a little damage in there, because why not? Toothy Imaginary Friend, another card that can get absolutely massive, and then it can draw us cards whenever we sacrifice it for that value. Chasm Skulker, again, sacrifice this guy and you'll get a massive board state on top of getting the value from sacrificing him. Locust God, this guy, we're drawing a lot of cards and we're just going to create that instant board state. Orcish Bowmaster. Now, this is another one of those cards that can create one of those 21-21s out of nowhere. One wheel effect, we're going to get a lot of damage to point at our opponent's creatures or our opponents, and then we're going to end up with that huge amassed army. Ominous Seas, we are drawing a lot of cards, so the foreshadow counters will come, and they will come fast. And then we just net ourselves a solid 8-8. Lazotop Chancellor. Now, this one is a little slow, but honestly, hey, we're trading mana for a bigger army that we can then sacrifice for value. It's gonna fit into the theme. Bladewing Deathless Tyrant. This is a perfect card to take advantage of our massive graveyard late game. All we have to do is cast this guy, and every creature we've sacrificed along this point will now help fuel his damage trigger to create an instant board state. Archfiend of Ifnir. I've never not won the game whenever this card resolves and sticks onto the battlefield, because your opponents just can't stick anything. Geralf and Gisa, these two are going to be solid to sacrifice those massive creatures again for that instant board state. Shadowheart can draw us a lot of cards, making our board even more massive while, giving us card advantage. Tegrid, God of Frights. Now, I run this because honestly I'm a terrible person, but if you're not a terrible person, you don't have to throw this in here. In a wheel deck though, it is kind of fun, and it is on theme as Sauron, to just take your opponent's shit. That's what he does, man. Rail the Everwise, perfect for those discarding effects, right? Now we're going to go ahead and discard our hand, and then we will draw cards equal to our hand as well as that 4 cards. It's going to synergize amazingly with our commander. Same with Teferi's Ageless Insight, right? Whenever we discard our hand, instead of drawing 4 cards, we're going to draw 8, which is going to be amazing. Moving on, let's talk about utilizing that graveyard. We have Ruthless Technomancer. Not only is this going to be a perfectly good option to sacrifice those massive creatures to create a lot of treasure tokens, we can then use some of those treasure tokens to bring those very low CMC creatures back to the battlefield to then start ramping up again. Additionally, then we have a lot of treasure tokens just to use. Chainer Nightmare Adept, another solid option to recast those very low CMC creatures such as Chasm Skulker. That way we can get them back to the battlefield and start growing again. Bag of Holdings, sometimes we discard stuff that we don't want to, and Bag of Holdings is going to be perfect for that. It'll let you discard your whole hand every turn while still letting you cast those cards that you need. Anger. This card is amazing in wheel decks. Haste is extremely useful. Buried Alive will get us exactly what we need into the graveyard. Hey, Anger is going to be an amazing target for this. Reanimate is a super low CMC spell that just brings something back from the graveyard. Body Double, another amazing thing that just copies something in our graveyard. Exhume, just looking at those low CMC reanimator types, just like Animate Dead. And Hell's Caretaker can also be super solid. Now we can sacrifice those very small armies before they get big to just bring stuff back from the graveyard. Let's move on to the core of the deck. We have the Ozolith. Kind of weird seeing this in a deck that's not green, but honestly it fits perfectly here. Those amass triggers paired with those Chasm Skulkers, paired with basically our whole strategy of putting a lot of 1/1 counters on these creatures, making them massive and sacrificing them, the Ozolith is going to fit perfectly here. Golem, Patient Plotter, this one's going to be amazing because of the ring tempting us. It'll let us trigger our commander more often, and we can easily get him back from the graveyard. Ring Sight's going to be an amazing tutor that, again, the ring will tempt us. Solid. Sauron, Lord of the Rings. This one's amazing because look at that CMC. It's insane. So the fact that we're running this in the 99 instead of as the commander is gonna really make it to where we're only using him late game and we're not trying to get to that mana as fast as possible, right? We don't feel pressured. There and back again. Now, I can't promise that this won't get destroyed before we get Smog, but if we do, this fits perfectly with everything we want. The ring will tempt us. We're gonna get some ramp, and additionally, if we do get that 6/6 dragon, we're just gonna sacrifice him for some instant value and a lot of treasure tokens. Dread Horde Invasions, just gonna keep amassing onto that stack of armies. Lazotop Plating, pretty useful, honestly, your opponents won't see this coming, and it just fits in with that amass theme. The Witch King, we can't play Sauron without throwing this guy in the 99. Additionally, he just fits well with the discard theme, and you know, it'll incentivize people not to attack us. Last but not least, we have Rise of the Dark Realms. This is going to be amazing because, hey, Sauron's our commander. The Necromancer himself will bring all of those cards back from the graveyard, everybody's graveyard notably, and then we'll have a massive army to take out our opponents. Moving on to card advantage, we have Gandalf, Friend of the Shire. This is going to be perfect. Now whenever the ring tempts us, we're going to get some card advantage off of that on top of our sorcery spells having flash. Call of the Rings, this is just a better version of Phyrexian Arena in this deck because one, it'll let us trigger our commander to Oblivion, and then whenever we choose a new ring bearer, we get to draw the card. Whispering Madness is going to be amazing. Getting into those wheel effects, we have Dark Deal, Dragon Mage, Windfall, Reforge the Soul, and Wheel of Misfortune. These cards are pretty simple. They're just going to wheel everybody, fill some graveyards, and buff our entire board up, right? That's the goal of this deck. Faithless Looting is going to be super solid. It's going to get rid of those high cost creatures early game, hopefully drawing us into our lands and whatever we need to catapult us into the lead. It's also super solid to let us discard those cards we want to reanimate and draw us into our win cons if we need it to dig deep. Moving on to ramp, we have Jeska's Will. Now this is kind of card advantage and ramp, which is exactly what we want, but honestly I found myself casting this early sometimes just to get a high costed commander onto the battlefield. And remember, hey, our commander does have some pretty decent protection, so getting him onto the battlefield early can be amazing. The Reaver Cleaver, our commander's pretty big, guys. He's pretty massive, and we're gonna have some pretty massive creatures along with that. So the Reaver Cleaver has a really high potential to create us a lot of treasure tokens. Arcane Signet, Dimir Signet, Izzet Signet, and Rakdos Signet, just some solid turn 2 ramp. Wayfarer's Bauble and Soul Ring, also that early game ramp, exactly what we need. Moving on to removal, we have that counterspell package with an Offer You Can't Refuse, Siren Storm Tamer, and Glen Elendra Archmage. Now, notably, we can cast Glen Elendra Archmage and Siren Storm Tamer or reanimate them from our graveyard, and they have the potential to be extremely annoying in this deck. Chaos Warp can get rid of any permanent we are having an issue with. Feed the Swarm, super solid. This can get rid of any of those enchantments and a creature in a pinch. Baleful Mastery is super flexible. It gets around indestructible, one of the few things that exiles in black. Additionally, it does have a pretty flexible casting cost. And I found, hey, in a scenario where it's 3 players against 1 because we run into an arch enemy issue, letting someone else draw the card is not terrible, especially when you're looking for that board wipe. Mandate of Abaddon is going to be a solid board wipe in this deck because, again, our commander is going to be massive and we are running a lot of pretty massive creatures, so 9 times out of 10 this can get rid of 90% of our opponent's board. Toxtril the Corrosive, this guy's in here for card advantage. No, no, he's not. Okay, this guy's messed up. He'll wipe the entire board, and honestly, we will win the game if they don't deal with this guy immediately. That's kind of what he does. He's nasty, he's mean, and so is Sauron, so they get together really well. Now, that's gonna do it for the deck tech, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I'll see you in the next one.